Hello everybody, Blue Dually, and today is actually day 2 of working on the dually. James and I got the motor partly pulled out. Hopefully today, unfortunately it's a little gloomy and rainy, we can get it the rest of the way out. As anyone who's pulled a 12 valve or 24 valve out of a second gen truck, you hit the oil pan on the front cross member before you can actually get it out from underneath the cowl enough to get it picked up. So I did a little looking around on YouTube and was surprised to not find a lot of videos on pulling the motor. So I did see a guy pull one out of a 2-wheel drive, and what he did was actually took all the bolts out of the front of the body mounts, took the 2 at the front of the cab out, and then loosened the 2 at the back of the cab, and actually put a 2x4 under this cross piece and lifted the body up a little bit, just tilted the whole cab back to give himself enough clearance to get the engine over that cross member without taking the oil pan off. I left the fan on it, probably shouldn't have. I'm going to take it off now. We had to stop yesterday just because it was getting so late, and so right now the engine is sitting on a 2x4 on the cross member, and the floor jack's actually holding the transmission up a little bit, because I thought to save some time we just pull the engine, the transmission, and the transfer case all out as one unit. Didn't realize there wasn't enough room to slide it all the way forward to get it up without really taking a lot of things off. We did run into a couple of hiccups which slowed us down quite a bit. Getting the power steering pump off, the vacuum pump, turned out to be a real pain in the ass. And the reason I didn't unhook it, just take it off the engine, is I didn't want to unhook all the hoses and lines, so I just wanted to take the pump off, set it to the side, and then we wouldn't have to worry about that. And then the engine mounts. You can only use a 15mm socket to get the bolts out of the engine mounts, and they're a son of a bitch, because you have to have a short or a standard length socket to get in there with a pry bar, and I don't have a big enough breaker bar or a long enough piece of heavy duty tube to put over my breaker bar I have to really break them loose. So we had to resort to the wrench, and an even bigger wrench to get it wiggled in there enough to get enough leverage to bust those loose, because they were on there super tight. So I shot James a text. We'll wait for him to get out up here, and like I said, I think what we're going to do is take out 4 of the body mount bolts, loosen the rear 2, and tilt the cab up enough, and then we can hopefully get this to clear. We'd only need to clear the cross member and the oil pan just by a hair, so we can pull this the rest of the way out. And I know the lighting's not very good out there because it's dark and cloudy, so this probably just looks like a black mess. I'm going to voice over the setup. I didn't film pulling the body mounts out or actually raising the cab. I wanted to pay attention to how the body was being raised. We have it up quite a bit, just a 2x4 and a piece of steel on the floor jack, and we tilted the cab up as far as I dared. It's not touching the bed, but it's pretty darn close. And the body didn't actually tweak or anything. It didn't even really throw a protest while we were jacking it up. We went really slow. You can see how much room's underneath the oil pan there. I'll bring the camera around so you can actually see that the hook's a little bit in the insulation in this shot, but it clears the firewall. The driveway is so steep and the wheels on the Harbor Freight hoist are small enough, the 2 of us together could not actually pull the truck's engine and transmission up into the garage, so we had to use the come along to actually help pull the engine out of the truck. I have James over by the engine here in a second. I'm going to give it a little yank with the come along there. And that setup actually works pretty good. I have one person running the come along, and then the other person can kind of twist the engine around a little bit and check as you're pulling the engine out to make sure you're not hung up on anything. He's raising it up a little bit. As I mentioned in the beginning of the video, I was going to pull the fan off, and my little captions, I told you why I didn't. I don't have a wrench that actually fits over the nut to take the fan off the water pump, so I'll have to run to the store and get a wrench for that. The only clips I actually cut out of pulling the engine are when we stopped for a lengthy period of time and had to actually like pull something we forgot, or we're just maybe standing around bullshitting for a little bit. But the other snag we run into here in just a little bit is trying to get the dipstick and the dipstick tube kind of fed underneath some wires. The lower part of the dipstick tube just snapped right off, almost where it goes into the pan, or the bottom of the engine block, excuse me. I'm pulling it out right here, and that's the only thing we really broke, pulling the engine this way. We did have a little trouble getting the radiator out and took a little bit of chunk of plastic out of the fan shroud. Otherwise, this setup actually worked really well. It's definitely a two-person job, just due to how heavy the engine and transmission and the transfer case combined are. If you had an overhead hoist and you pulled the hood off the truck, you could probably do it by yourself and then maybe roll it out a little smoother. I'm going to move the camera here and get you a little better shot. While we're pulling it out here, this is where we run into one of the other little hang-ups, is the transfer case is actually getting hung up on the four-wheel drive shift lever that's bolted to the cab still. So I actually believe the body mount, or the intercooler mount that we bent, that I'd point out a little later in the video, I think it actually got bent when I got in the pickup truck with the cab raised to get the couple of bolts out of the top of that four-wheel drive shifter. Once we knocked that out, it came out pretty smooth. I think if I were going to do this differently or have any tips and tricks, pull the four-wheel drive shifter if you're doing a four-wheel drive truck, or I might pull the transfer case off and then tape up the back of the transmission and pull the engine and the transmission out. The process of pulling it out this way by tilting the cab up, I actually think is a pretty smooth way to do it. If my driveway were level, it went a little better. If I had spent a little more money on the engine hoist with some better wheels, probably would have went a little smoother as well. The 2-ton Harbor Freight, it did the job. I think if the truck were sitting level, it had done a little better job. We might not have needed the come along trick to pull it into the garage. Now, the other thing I'll add on tilting the cab up, on a regular cab, it's not that bad. An extended cab, you could also probably do it pretty safely. Now, on a quad cab truck, I don't know if I would jack it up from the radiator support like I'm doing here. I think what you'd really have to do is maybe have 2 floor jacks and jack the body up closer to the front cab mounts. That way you just don't have so much weight on the inner fenders and things. You're actually picking up more of the heft back on the body itself, so you're not tweaking stuff as much. But I think you could do it on a quad cab again with a little patience and 2 good jacks. We actually got the motor pulled far enough forward, we're going to set the body back down and then finish slowly working the engine out. Speaking of oil,
as you can see, the front of the motor is pretty gross. The front main seal has been leaking for a while, and I believe the seal around that gear cover has also been leaking for a little while. The coolant, when I emptied the coolant out, was really clean. The oil's always been clean. I don't feel any metal or see any shiny bits in it when I change the oil. So the main reason we're pulling the engine out is to go through it top to bottom, change the seals that need changed, change the seals that don't need changed. Because it's out, might as well do it. This is a 1998 Dodge, so it's a 24-year-old truck, has 200,000 miles on it. The rear main seal is completely dry, but since I have the engine separated from the transmission, might as well change it now so I don't have to worry about it in the future a little bit, just because that kind of stuff's a pain in the ass some days. We're finally lowering the body back down onto the body mounts. We have the engine pulled out far enough that the head and that hook on the lifting eye on the back of the engine clears the cowl completely now. So we're going to finish wiggling everything out, and we get hung up on the insulation a little bit, but that's only, at this point, the only last snag we really have is getting the transmission clear the insulation. Some other work that's going on the truck while I have it all this tore apart is the engine's getting a little more TLC besides seals. I have a Hamilton camshaft put in it, new push rods and tappets, and stiffer valve springs. So the transmission swap will take care of that. The transfer case will also be getting a seal kit. I've noticed it's not leaking, but it is damp in a few spots, so it's coming apart anyways to get bolted to a different transmission. It wouldn't make any sense not to work on it with everything out of the truck. The other big thing is, even though the truck has low miles for its years, the body is really rust free, minus two little spots in the quarter panels, both in the same spot right behind the wheels, right up next to the door, and a little bit on the tailgate. So I'm going to pressure wash the engine bay, the frame, the underside of the cab. I'm going to pressure wash the shit out of that so I can spray some rust inhibiting paint on the few areas of the frame that are a little rusty, and then spray everything underneath the cab and the engine bay with undercoating paint. So it'll be damn near a brand new truck underneath it. With the seals being changed, the engine will be a lot better, and I know I won't have to worry about things for quite some time. As I mentioned earlier in the video, I tried not to cut a lot out, so this video is going to be on the longer side. It did take us quite a bit longer to get the engine out and on the ground from that first clip when I kind of tell you what we're doing, but we were just really taking our time. We have one more clip we missed on the back of the engine to free the wiring harness up, and then the transfer case gets kind of snagged on the insulation on the bottom of the cab. So James crawls underneath there with a pry bar, just kind of gives it a little bit of a wiggle. Everything is free and comes out fairly easy. Like I said, I don't know if there's a better way to do it than this way, but this way seems pretty slick to me. I am really happy with how we managed to get it out. We're playing a little bit with clearances. The engine's just about touching the arm on the engine hoist, and our biggest hang up is because the truck just isn't sitting level. The engine hoist isn't level on the ground. So that's kind of what's hanging everything up a little bit. We're just trying to wiggle the engine a little back and forth to see if maybe we're just caught on something somewhere that we haven't seen yet. James is actually thinking he might put the jack underneath the transfer case to tilt it up a little bit. I think what I end up doing is just raising the engine up a little bit more, and then we'll start pulling it out again. The biggest problem with the truck not being level is like I said, the engine hoist actually is touching those lines up there on the top of the engine, but as you can see, we're damn near clear of everything. There is a clip on the back of the or on the top of the bell housing we haven't realized we forgot yet, and we're just, as you can see, just a hair over getting across that body member. So like I said, he was going to use a floor jack. I got to looking and figured I'll just raise the engine up a little bit higher. I tried to twist it towards me a little bit to clear the valve cover. And then, yeah, just raise the engine up a little more and hope for the best. If the fan wasn't on there, that'd have helped a whole bunch. But what do you do at this point? At this point, it was, well, we have to get it out now, so let's just get it out. While James is kind of keeping an eye on the engine, I'm going back to the come along and slowly pulling the engine back out. He freaks out a little bit because there's 6 wheels on the engine hoist, and the 2 back ones aren't even touching the ground at this point. So he gives it a little wiggle. I keep rocking it with the come along and just keep working it out. Eventually, you're going to see it just kind of pop free, and then that'll be pretty much it. And it all comes back to not being on level ground. If I could use a engine leveler or load leveler like you can use on just about most things, that'd have made life a lot easier. But because there's so little room between the engine and the cowl, you can't actually get a load leveler on it. So here's James raising the engine up a little bit, and it's gonna kind of rock forward. There it goes. So you do just kind of have, it's definitely a 2-person job pulling an engine out of this truck, especially with everything the way it is. That got it up just that little bit, so it just slid right across that body member. That's kind of where one of the scratches came at. At this point, it is pretty much just slowly work the engine out. As you notice, we haven't figured out we still have a clip connecting the wiring harness to the back of the engine. This is also the part where the transfer case actually snags on the insulation of the cab. So we'll eventually notice it here. James goes looking for the wire cutters, and that's him checking to see that we're actually hung up on or I'm checking to see what we're hung up on. But yeah, James is under there. He's gonna kind of get the pry bar between the insulation and that transfer case, and after that's free, we'll cut that wiring harness clip the rest of the way off, and then the engine does come out smoothly the rest of the way. It's a bit of a process, and the video is a little over 28 minutes long, but I didn't want to cut out so much that it seems like we did it a lot faster than we did. 28 minutes is still quite a bit less time than what it took in real life. The 4-wheel drive shifter took us a little while to figure out that not only were there 2 nuts on studs that you had to take out from the underside, but there were 2 kind of self-tappers you had to do from the top. That took a little while. So going back kind of to what I said earlier in the video, if you take the 4-wheel drive shifter out and get absolutely everything disconnected and out of the way beforehand, Then when you get the engine pulled forward and up a little bit, you can get those engine mounts off, and then everything goes a lot smoother. There we are, just cutting that clip, and we'll put the camera in a different location. You can see the wiring just kind of hanging off the side of the truck. The cable's right there in that plate that my hand just blocked. That's the throttle linkage from the pedal that bolts onto the pump. So the last few minutes getting the engine out and over that little lip in the garage. So now that the camera's outside, I'll probably turn the sound back on because I don't think you can actually hear the radio.
We're still too deep of an angle to move my hand.
Right. Well, our back wheels aren't even touching.
Okay, I'm just gonna watch her along.
Okay, let me wrap some hoses out of the way. Okay. Oh yeah, we're good. How's our board holding up? Nice.
Good thing we had this deal behind us, though.
Oh yeah. Okay, hold on. Okay, you're good. Oh, Gordon, will you get your fuel line? I can't. If I let this go at all, it's going to smush the shit out of it. Okay, is it free enough that I can let it rest? Okay. That is a fucking monster piece of fucking machinery, dude.
So, when we put it back in, we'll put the motor in. Pull the cross member. The transmission we're putting in is bigger than that.
We'll take all the fun. Yeah, no shit. I'm all for it. I'm all for it.
Well, and I think even if it doesn't have fluid in it, the automatic's going to be heavy enough. We're going to push this hoist to the max. Okay, so let's see if we can't just give her a little nudgy your way. Hold it there.
Oh yeah.
Let's actually.
We're gonna go up.
We're going to lower it this time. So,
Oh.
just about like that.
Oh yeah. She's.
All right.
Okay.
So now we are.
Gonna have to go back up. Just here, because it's gonna run across the top.
Yeah. Well, or let me pull it out, and you might be able to just tip it up a bit.
Okay.
Everything will go straight line.
Okay, hold on. Okay. That's just. Oh, it's because our wheels are fucking turned. Yep. There we go. Okay, hold on. Wait just a second. Pause. Oh, I'm scratching the shit out of your paint. Sorry.
You're right.
Okay, now we're good. I was afraid that when this thing tilted, it was just gonna fucking
Right. Okay. Go up a little.
just a little bit. Oh. gonna hit anything over there? Woo! Yeah, buddy. I'm so proud of us.
Come on. Come on.
Okay. Woo. Terrifying. Keep going. Keep going. Just set it across the legs. Okay, stop. Let's get it in where we want it positioned. Yeah.
I'll do the stand. You just push on the motor. Ready? Ready. This is a little aggressive.
Sorry.
Nope, right.
Okay.
Go ahead and yeah, there's a lot of weight up there.
Yeah.
Slowly come down.
This is kind of where you want it? Oh, okay, hold on.
Around the bell housing,
Yep,
looks like.
yep. Leaking like a sieve. Okay, hold on. Why don't we get, where is it? Should we put a rubber pad or anything under that?
Now, sitting down the wrist, way gentle.
Yeah, should be good. Real slow. Okay. Come on, keep going. Almost there.
Trying to keep the
Coolant.
Well, there we go. Engine, transmission, and transfer case pulled out of the truck in one piece. We did have to redneck it a bit and use the come along to pull it up because my driveway is just as steep enough an angle. We couldn't physically pull the engine out at all, but we scuffed up the front body cross member a little bit, and then we bent this little guy just a little bit when we lifted the whole cab up. And then you can see, maybe, there you go. You can see we got into the insulation a little bit and scuffed up the undercoating on the body just a touch. So, there we go. Thanks to James for helping me out. I couldn't have done it without him.
You got it, buddy.
And we're gonna go grab lunch. So when you see this video, we're filming on Sunday, so a week will have gone by, and I'll probably got the engine up on the engine stand. So we'll catch you guys later.
Peace.